At its peak, the Ming Dynasty was one of the most centralized and powerful empires in the world. But in a move that defied every economic instinct, it chose to ban the ocean. Not metaphorically, literally. It shut down private maritime trade. It wasn't pirates or war that damaged China's global position. It was a domestic policy based on fear, not strategy. This is the story of the Haijin, a band that strangled coastal prosperity, empowered smugglers, and let the rest of Asia surge ahead. The story begins in the late 1300s. The Ming Dynasty had just overthrown the Mongol-led Yuan. The founder, Emperor Hongwu, was a peasant-turned warrior who didn't trust anyone outside his inner circle, especially not wealthy merchants. The imperial court viewed trade as a destabilizing force. The logic was simple. Foreign merchants bring ideas, weapons, and alternate centers of influence. In an empire obsessed with internal control, that kind of access was unacceptable. So the state introduced the Haijin policy, the sweeping ban on all private maritime trade. Only government-sanctioned tribute missions were permitted. Private ships? Forbidden. Merchant fleets? Dismantled. Foreign trade was to be conducted only on official terms. The goal was to curb piracy, keep coastal elites in check, and preserve central authority, but the policy did the exact opposite. To understand the Haijin, you have to understand the mindset of the Ming leadership. They were not traders, they were bureaucrats and military men. Their measure of success was not economic growth, but social order. The sea represented disorder. Smugglers could become warlords. Foreign contacts could lead to alliances beyond the empire's control, and coastal regions were harder to monitor than landlocked provinces. The tribute system, in contrast, was predictable and centralized. Foreign envoys arrived, offered symbolic gifts, and received imperial goods in return. It wasn't about commerce, it was about hierarchy. The court liked this model because it reinforced the idea of the emperor as the center of the world. But the rest of Asia had moved on. Commercial trade was exploding across Southeast Asia. Maritime networks were forming with or without China. The Haijin policy was a response to fear. Fear of decentralization, fear of external influence, fear of economic actors outside the court's reach. But it wasn't a proactive strategy, it was a defensive maneuver with no endgame. The results were immediate and predictable. Merchants, especially in coastal provinces like Fujian and Zhejiang, ignored the ban. Trade didn't stop, it just went underground. Smuggling networks expanded. Local officials either looked the other way or got paid to stay silent. The policy turned law-abiding traders into criminals and pirates into supply chain managers. Enter the Woko. These coastal raiders, originally a mix of Japanese and Chinese, stepped into the power vacuum. With no official fleets in operation, these pirates became the de facto maritime brokers of East Asia. They attacked trade routes, extorted local villages, and ran shadow economies that bypassed state control entirely. Meanwhile, countries like Vietnam, Siam, and Malacca took full advantage of China's retreat. Their ports flourished, trade networks shifted south. Chinese goods still moved, but now through foreign intermediaries who extracted their share. The Haijin did not protect China's economic interests, it exported them. The policy also had a chilling effect on coastal development. Entire regions that had previously thrived on trade were economically strangled. Local shipbuilders, traders, and dock workers lost livelihoods. Coastal urbanization slowed. Tax revenues fell. The very security the Ming hoped to preserve was now being undermined by economic decline and lawlessness. Despite mounting evidence that the Haijin was a failure, the Ming court refused to reverse course. For decades, successive emperors doubled down on the policy. Tweaks were made, exceptions were granted, but the core assumption that private maritime trade was a threat remained intact. The one major deviation was the Zheng-He expeditions. These state-sponsored voyages showcased Chinese naval power, but they were diplomatic showcases, not commercial ventures. They did not create sustainable trade networks or economic alliances. When the voyages ended, the Haijin tightened once again. By the mid-1500s, the contradictions had become too large to ignore. The court could no longer enforce the ban effectively. Smuggling was rampant, the pirates were not being defeated, and officials were openly profiting from black market trade. Eventually, the policy was eroded by reality. It wasn't repealed with fanfare, it simply faded, replaced by a reluctant return to semi-regulated trade. The damage, however, was already done. China had lost a century of maritime leadership. Its influence in Southeast Asia had been diluted, and its own economy had been weakened by a policy designed to protect it. The Haijin is a case study in the failure of over-centralization. The Ming leadership prioritized control over flexibility, hierarchy over responsiveness. The policy didn't just fail to achieve its objectives, it created the exact conditions it was supposed to prevent. Instead of stopping piracy, it allowed pirates to become dominant actors. Instead of limiting foreign influence, it outsourced trade to third parties. Instead of reinforcing state authority, it hollowed out coastal governance. More importantly, it showed that economic systems do not respond well to binary commands. Trade flows around obstacles, merchants find new routes, and policies based on fear of loss are rarely resilient. The Ming court was operating in a global environment that was shifting toward open maritime exchange. By choosing isolation, it left the door open for others to build the networks, alliances, and economic centers that China abandoned. In the end, the Haijin wasn't just a failed policy, it was a warning. Empires that refuse to adapt don't just fall behind, they make themselves irrelevant. The Ming Dynasty banned the ocean, the world simply sailed around it.